Gen Zs were butchered. They didn't go to hospitals to condole with those who had been injured, who were nursing bullet wounds. They didn't go to morgues to see and pray for the dead. They went to State House to meet the president.
So I want to focus on the leadership conversation. I've heard Collins being very nice and thanking the provost for hiding the youth. That is what is expected of them. It's like thanking a mother for taking care of their child. You know, we are not thanked enough as mothers, but it should come so naturally that you don't expect, oh, thank you for saving so many people. Maybe they would have saved more if they spoke up.
You know, Reverend, as you talk about service to the people and the fact that this is something that leaders have to consider when they get into position of influence, I am reminded of the various and numerous stories I've listened from different quarters when they say they want to achieve a Singaporean dream. And in pursuit of that, everyone wants to be and live the Singaporean dream in Kenya. However, we are doing nothing towards the same. You just mentioned about service, and it reminds me of the current conversation we are having as a nation about the new, is it social health authority? Yes, and the shift. When you visualize what is supposed to be attained with this, many will argue that, in fact, the fact that we had NHIF, it was functioning for all of us. And maybe to you it might not apply because you pray for miracles and people get well. But for those who don't get these miracles and have to go to hospital, would you say this thing is addressing the problems of Kenya? Because the whole aspect of it is to really bring efficiency. How efficient would you judge this program? And I know I'm asking you something that is, you're not a doctor, not an expert in this, but I'd like to get your view as somebody who visualizes, the miracle of healing.
Eli, shift is something that has really angered me, and as you say, because my trade is different, I'm working with some of our friends seeking to put together a memoranda that we would want to take to Parliament so that this thing is followed up. And has given me a little glimpse into this, but you realize, Jeff, as much as the court keeps being on the side of government, as far as some of this legislation is concerned, including SHIF or SHA, what you want to ask is, what was wrong with NHIF that we had to replace NHIF? NHIF worked, and the members of All Saints Cathedral who come to church that I work with, some of them are entrepreneurs who own huge and massive hospitals. They say from where they said NHIF worked. One of them really cried one day when we had this conversation about 2 months ago, because NHIF would pay every 2 weeks. You treat as an hospital, then after 2 weeks, you're paid. Because this is a big hospital that has huge contracts with a particular section of government. So they treat thousands of government officers every month, but every 2 weeks they're paid. Every 2 weeks they're paid. Since SHIF came in, first, even before it came in officially, for the last 1 year and a half, they have never been paid. They cannot stop treating government people. They cannot be paid. So one, there is no one is really telling us clearly what was the problem with NHIF. But number two, NHIF had a platform that was working, that we spent 5 billion shillings to build, an infrastructure that taxpayers' money of 5 billion shillings was put in to build. That infrastructure was working, and it was new. It is not an outdated infrastructure. Somebody sits and says, there's tender here, we need to make money, brings in a SHIF, and we're using 104 billion shillings to build another infrastructure and a system that will be paid over 10 years, replacing a system that was working. Eli and colleagues who are on the call, what I note is that every government wants to have a project that has money to be eaten and to be stolen. That for me is the answer to this nonsense shift thing. As we speak, some of our friends here have gone to hospital over the last 2 weeks. The part that NHIF used to pay, it's not being paid. You have to pay that. Not that someone will reimburse you when you claim later. That is gone. So we are talking of hundreds of millions of shillings not being paid every single day for people who have contributed to that kitty that are going down the drain. These are corruption being harnessed, money is being harnessed and being kept aside to fund an election that is coming. So we must rise up. I think Kenyans are known for being too docile. And what Gen Z showed us in June is a tip of an iceberg. I think we need to get angry enough. You see people dying on the corridors of hospitals because NHIF cannot, SHIF cannot admit them. We must get angry enough and say enough is enough. We must get out and make things happen differently. Personally, from where I sit, I'd wish to see a movement 3 times bigger than the Gen Z's demos. And you'll see me in my black cassock that you saw me in on the 25th of June. We'll lead the demonstrations and go to Parliament and ask Parliament that you've messed up people's life enough. We must do things differently. Eli, that for me is my conviction. We cannot see people die in hospitals in the name of a tenderpreneur project that is meant to benefit a few people who want to fund the coming election, yet we just keep quiet. I don't know how much we need to be shaken for us to get up and act.
So Reverend, when you convene with your colleagues, men of the cloth, and you look at this country, you look at the decision being made and some of those legislations that are being formulated to enable the thieving that is happening in the country, what do they tell you about this? I mean, should we speak in tongues for them to understand that things are not working? Or are we supposed just to lay our hands and spread them and say God will take care of it? Because you are saying we have to have too much rage to the extent that it will be 3 times what happened on the 25th of June. But we're coming to a point that some people are even feeling helpless. They can no longer hold that rage. You talk about healthcare. The young people today, if they are getting into the job market, or the old people that are retiring cannot afford to pay for this new subscription. And if they are paying, the other day I was speaking to a friend of mine who told me they have a cancer patient. Initially, they could get up to 45,000 payment per session, and they are allowed, I think, 2 sessions every month for those therapies that they have to undergo, and it becomes very complicated for them. So, what conversations do your peers have? Maybe you can help us understand if we also have to go to seek the face of God, kwa sababu imekuwa ngumu, hatuelewi hivi uongozi wenyu kabisa.
Just probably, Reverend, before you come in, just to put it in context, especially in relation to the health matters, we know there is a conglomerate in quotes, or the Adani group is coming on board, or indirectly, with the support of Safaricom and other people to create and work on a system that's supposed to help the SHA work. But it's been a problem. And today, 3 hours ago, you've seen that the government, or the DCR said, or the DPP has said, Yagnesh Devani is no longer, a person of interest, because there is nothing against him, because the evidence that was adduced is no longer viable and the people who were there died. How does that sound in the light of the question that we're talking about, the health system that already seems to be a problem, and then people who have been engaged in corrupt deals getting a shot again at a very critical institution, or a part of a health service is very important to the people? How does that bode with you and the people you relate with?
I strongly feel that there's a huge political game plan in all these things, and that is why Raila had to be onboarded. Sorry that I'm mentioning a name. If the DCIs are here, please,
They're always here.
you'll understand. You'll understand why Raila had to be onboarded to calm down things and to tame temperatures, and to create a system where no one questions, because it was largely Baba who would question. I feel from where I sit that the president is playing super politics and has made sure that he's silencing quarters that would be grumbling and making noise. I'm not sure whether he's compromising the judiciary and making those rulings, but I'm sure that he's compromising political formations that they will stand on his side and be in his favor as far as these things are concerned. We all know that only a mad person would sell the symbol of their national pride, which is an airport the size of JKIA, and all the innuendos of what the Adani group seeks to do in this country. I think from where I sit, these are calculated political strategies that are covering massive corruption. For you to believe me, there are these gentlemen who are roped in this broad-based government. Previously, they were on the other side, and they were questioning some of these things. They were questioning over taxation. When they got in, they stopped. They started singing the tune of the government. They were questioning other things, including what we are now seeing in the form of the Adanis. Now, they're the ones championing. And so from where I sit, whether you look at it as Adani, whether you look at it as extension of life of parliament and term for president, whether you look at it as a shift, I think underneath what we are not seeing is corruption being covered there so that certain people can benefit. And when people who would ordinarily speak are given food to eat, as we say, when you're eating, you don't talk. And so, colleagues and friends, from where I sit, unfortunately, most of religious leaders would not have these conversations. And when I try to propose, can we harness our voices? Can we harness an action plan? But very few people would want to listen to such. And so I don't know what we can do, but I'll give some 3 submissions in terms of practical action later. Let me not say them now.
Good evening, Eli. Thank you so much. Greetings to your listenership. First, I wish to say that the church has fallen prey to the decadence that is afflicting the Kenyan society. And therefore, it has proven incapable of rising to the occasion and discharging its divine role as the voice of reason, as the conscience of the society, as the voice of the weak, the vulnerable, and the poor, and to at all times stand on the side of social justice. At all times project, articulate, and champion equity. They haven't risen to that occasion. Why? Because like the state, they are consumed by conspicuous consumerism. They advocate this free market ideology. They're into business, they're into money minting schemes. They look at their parishioners as customers, people you can mint money from. And therefore, they are incapable of calling out the state actors, and there are many, many excesses. Before I delve deeper into my submission, Eli, when you reference Matiang'i, I ask myself a question as to whether we are hardwired as a society to read our challenges, our issues through a binary framework. Because Matiang'i did not have the moral authority to caution Kenyans against voting for anybody on the basis of moral rectitude or lack of it. Because this is an individual, when he held the portfolio of interior, the bodies that were pulled from River Yala, and he said nothing. Do you know of any country where bodies will be pulled from a river or from a bush and no senior government official says anything? And especially the person who holds the docket under who Kenyan security falls. He kept quiet, he kept mum. It's as if he didn't see what was happening. Secondly, if you're part of a government and you've got evidence that some of the prospective candidates, people are about to vie for various selective positions, do not meet the requirements as set out by the Constitution, why would you speak as if you're helpless? Because you're supposed to filter candidates for Kenyans, for the electorate. People who are undesirable, people who are wash, as you put it, should not make it to the ballot. Why do you allow them to go to the ballot? What do you expect Kenyans to do? I will tell you why. Because he was playing cynical politics. He was playing cynical politics. If he wasn't, you act as the state. You act. You have evidence this person has illicitly acquired money, property, and therefore they do not have what it takes to vie for an elective position. Yes, that's what you do. You don't want Kenyans. So I have a problem when we try to draw a dichotomy between these political actors, while in actual sense they are just one and the same thing, extremely, extremely decadent. The priest, I wish to raise my reservations when he talks about the role of the church is to, advise the people, advise Kenyans, especially during elections. To me, that's being equivocal. It's being equivocal because you have to be forthright as a priest, as a person who is speaking from the chair. You draw your mandate, your authority from God. These people draw their mandate from people, from the electorate. So you speak from a higher authority as a man of God. So you can tell Kenyans, this election here, truth be said, you do not have a choice. These people are one and the same thing. You don't have a choice. So you can go and vote. But I can tell you, I've weighed these two candidates or whichever number of candidates, none of them presents a transformative agenda. Or you call out that whom you think does not have what it takes to ascend to the apex office, just like the Old Testament prophets used to speak with authority. They would warn that if you continue behaving the way you're doing, there will be repercussions down the road. Their message was never equivocal, very forthright. So there's something fundamentally flawed when church ministers relay a message that is lukewarm and wishy-washy. Because in other jurisdictions before, the church has led the people against autocratic regimes, against corrupt regimes. In Manila, the Philippines, a Catholic priest in 1986, James Sin, he led a people's revolution against Ferdinand Marcos. Yes. In Europe, John Paul II single-handedly fought against communism in his homeland, Poland, and in Eastern Europe at large until communism collapsed. In Latin America, the church, the Roman Catholic Church, was instrumental in fighting against autocratic regimes. They did not sit on the fence. They spoke at the pain of some of them being killed, and they were killed. Closer home in Congo, the Catholic Church is very powerful. They have been very vocal. Other than the state in Congo, the Catholic Church is the second most powerful institution. And the same is about Kenya. They spoke openly against, for instance, stolen elections that brought Etienne, what is the name, Felix Tshisekedi into power. They spoke against that election was fraudulent. Why is it that in Kenya, church ministers tend to be wishy-washy, equivocal? They don't speak up. They always swing for peace. The other day they went to State House to try and reconcile William Ruto and Rigathi. You ask, in whose interest would you be midwifing that kind of reconciliation? In whose interest? Clearly, it's not in the interest of the people of Kenya. In whose interest? When Gen Zs were butchered, they didn't go to hospitals to condole with those who had been injured, who were nursing bullet wounds. They didn't go to morgues to see and pray for the dead. They went to State House to meet the president. I'm not so sure that's what Jesus would do amidst such brutal force against citizens by the state. Jesus will not do that. So I think it is a moral crisis that we're facing as the people of Kenya, and the church is not immune to it. It's not immune to it. It's not immune to it because, as I said, of this ideology of conspicuous consumerism. The government officials, the president, and those kind of people, it's like they're role models, even to some church ministers. They would like to be like those people. And that's why they easily accept appointments into the state. That compromises you. They easily invite these people into churches on Sundays, give them platforms after the church, and what do? They render the church sacrilegious. Yes, spewing hate speech, spewing ethnic vitriol, attacking one another from the church. And church ministers are seated there. Some are clapping, some are laughing. Why is it that after you presided over the service is over? You can organize your political rally elsewhere. But here, everybody who came here came for a service. I have presided over service, it's over. You go. But they give them the platform. What do? Balkanize the country. They speak that politics of shareholding, that politics of which and whatever, and the church ministers are there. Now, you look at it, is the church in Kenya the salt of the earth? Clearly it's not. Is the church in Kenya capable of addressing corruption? Clearly it is not. So, I think the church will have to introspect, because where we are, they have completely lost the moral compass. They have abandoned their flock. They have abandoned the people of Kenya to their devices, and they have joined the political elite and, as it were, the earthly people in the rat race. And therefore, immorality and ethical conduct and all forms of deviancy are likely to continue going into the future, because among the institutions that are highly tribalized in Kenya is the church. So are they going to fight tribalism? They cannot. They stand indicted for the very same excesses that they would be expected to call out the state actors for. Thank you.
Well, I didn't see that coming, but Reverend, when you come to this space, we come with expectations like
Yes.
when you go to church and they're telling you today you're going to receive from the of God and you're going to eat from this table. Growing up, I used to go to this church that they talk about chakula cha mchana. And being that you're coming from home early in the morning in order to attend the first service, will be there so that you can tukule chakula ya Mungu and chakula cha Bwana. I waited for the plates, Reverend, until saa 8, saa 9, and then they tell you have to stay again for the other one evening service where they'll be serving the food of chakula cha Bwana. I stayed the whole day in the church until I noticed kumbe it was the word. So why are you feeding us word with no food? Evans, Reverend,
And
karibu
being a
sana.
leader is not a good thing, is it?
Say again?
What is his name? Let me get his name. What was the name of my colleague?
And being a lawyer and food is being served, but in words can be very difficult.
And they served it the whole day. The whole day. You can imagine your faithfuls have arrived. They are hungry. And you tell them God will provide. And they are there waiting for God to provide the whole day. Reverend, is that what you do? Anyway, this was not me to divert, but thank you for
Now,
being here. That was Weston, and now you have the mic, Reverend.
thanks, Weston. Now, Weston has raised very fundamental issues there. I'd only wish to respond by one clarifying one of the issues he's raised. As I said, probably, I guess Weston was there when I started. I fear in our context to generalize and say the church. Because when we say the church, Weston, then it means the church has failed, the church has not done this. I've even seen the comments on the chart. Then we are bundling everyone together in the same pot and missing out on outliers or people who stood out to represent what is akin to what you've mentioned in different jurisdictions, both in Africa and outside of Africa. I say that because initially I had mentioned that a section of the church. So a section of the church, in my view, from where I sit, in my political analysis, betrayed the course of the church and went ahead and endorsed political parties or individuals or candidates. The same I would say of this, that there are sections of the church that have either remained silent, that have compromised, that have clapped when politicians are spewing those venom that we hear. But there are sections of church leaders who really stood out and represented what is right. And that is plain and is very clear. Catholics who are here or fellow Kenyans who are here, you've heard of a Catholic Archbishop that I truly, truly admire and deeply respect, Archbishop Anthony Muheria, has remained consistent throughout. And he's spoken, there are moments that he's lone-ranged, but it has never bothered him that he was alone. But Muheria has spoken boldly, whether it's on television, whether it's giving interviews, whether it's in talk shows, everywhere, he's remained very consistent. And I could mention several others, even myself, the other time we were having a conversation with Collins. At those heights of Gen Z's, All Saints is among the churches that spoke out very loudly, very clearly. We have even documented evidences of how we boldly spoke into the messes that were going on. And I can tell even by the time the president is bringing down the cabinet and sacking CSs and advisors, who championed those conversations? It was yours truly who is speaking here. And therefore, when we say that the church has failed, yes, the church has failed as the institution, but there is always something called the remnant. We've had a remnant that has stood out and has spoken consistently. When a few individuals go to State House to massage the egos of the president, they not necessarily would represent your church, as it were. And so we must accept that we have those outliers. We have, like in every system, you'll have things that happen in an undesirable way. I think that's all I would say there. But Western, I totally agree that the church must rise up and speak boldly. Eli and Mizani 254, if you would ask me, what would help us to cure some of the problems that we have today? As I said, maybe I would say more, but let me just say three only, real quick. Number one is to create a system where we speak against all forms of evil, regardless of who perpetrates them, from all corners of the society, from the church front, from the civil society front, from the corporate space, from individual spaces, from the electorate space, every space. If we did that, and when we started, you quoted Archbishop Gitari, you quoted Reverend Joya, what made them too powerful and a threat, even at that time, to the leadership then, was the fact that they would speak everyone in their corner, and it would work up the president, and he'd wonder what's going on here. And for me, from where I sit, I wish we could speak out boldly. But then number two, for you to speak out boldly, we need information. Somebody like Omola, as you see me here, I'm a trained theologian, I'm a minister, I'm not a governance expert, for example. I would get into governance as a lay person. But there are people who are doing this. If information was available, like now we are talking very Joakali and high level about things like SHA, on SHA here. If we had information in all quarters, people who have platforms, like I have a big platform, critical mass of influencers come to the church that I lead, and same with many other people across this city. If we were empowered with information, then that speaking would even be more powerful. We say in advocacy, information is power, and especially when it is factual, it has more power. Then that would shake the foundations a lot more. So number one, I think I'm encouraging Mizani that let's all speak from our quarters. Number two, arm ourselves with factual information to drive our advocacy agenda against ills that are happening in the society. But then finally, I would wish to recommend that Mizani, alongside other like-minded institutions or platforms, help us to harness our action plans so that we are not lone-ranging in seeking to hold government accountable, in seeking to do what is right. That it is not Omolo at All Saints Cathedral standing alone, or Collins in his corner standing alone, or Mizani in their little corner standing alone, or Muheri Archbishop speaking alone at that corner. But if we harnessed those voices and facts and information, then drew a plan, then in my view, we should be able to get somewhere. Whether it's submitting a solid memorandum, whether it's mass action, whatever it is, I believe that would begin to correct the foundations of leadership that we have in this country and will lead us somewhere towards realizing better governance for the sake of this country. I submit, Eli.
Thank you. I know you've been talking for some time now, but on a quick one, last week on Friday, the country finally closed the window for submission of memorandums. And some of the pertinent issues included the extension of presidential term limit, the Senate, the members of parliament, and the MCAs. Do you want to comment shortly on that, if you may?
I know there was public participation. There are different memoranda that were submitted around that. And if I'm well advised, I guess this has to, based on constitutional provision, go through a referendum. And I hope any lawyer here who can validate that. you could see the mood even at KICC was potentially 80% against these extensions. So my view 100% resonates with that position, that there is no need. The argument being advanced by the mover of the motion completely do not hold water. That it's too expensive to be financing an election every 5 years. We can save that money. You will still have to finance that election whenever it is. It's not about 5 years or 7. You still have to finance it, and all those other issues. I am 100% opposed to this, and I'm on record, and I want to be on record yet again that it is careless. It is an insult to the intelligence and commitment of Kenyans, to good governance, to want to push extension of life of parliament and term limits for the president. 100% opposed to that. And I think from where I sit, those are some of the things that we can galvanize all the forces that are present around us and make statements. And if the only thing that government can hear then it's picketing, then we can picket and march to parliament and tell parliament from where we sit, this one is a no, and we're not accepting this. That indeed is my position as an individual.
Permit me to say, very good suggestions. The fear I have is that, we also have a system that misuses and abuses the police system. And Reverend, you'd bear witness that on the 25th of June, some Kenyans, young Kenyans who are doing exactly what you suggest, were shot on live television. And the excuse that was given through the Ministry of Interior and people who are responsible was unsatisfactory. And to date, that has just gone like water under the bridge and it doesn't matter anymore. How safe are we and how confident can we be that constitutionalism would lead, that sense would prevail to the people who are not doing the right thing, to understand that people are asking for what is rightfully theirs, and not because they hate them, but it's because they want a better governed country.
Let me not say much on that, but I think what is provided for in the Constitution and rights that are protected by law really should not be the citizenry begging or asking. And I think if procedures are followed as far as what the law says in terms of peaceful picketing is concerned, that should be allowed. It is not a privilege. It is not an ask. It is something that is a right of every Kenyan citizen and must be allowed. My fear, my brother, is that if we wait for the government to feel softer and to feel more compassionate that they will not do it, is then we can go ahead, then nothing really will happen. For autocrats like what we are experiencing today, sometimes the language they understand is when people demand what is rightfully theirs. I understand 100% because I was at the front line during those shootings. And again, for record, if we did not do what we did when 3,000 young Gen Zs sought refuge at All Saints Cathedral on the 25th of June by pushing away the police, we would have seen the greatest massacre in a single day in the city. So we were at the front line and we saw what police would do. And I think we need to push back on that and not to be fearful and allow them to win or get away with it. But I understand 100% as well what you say, and my heart goes out to people who are killed, but it will have to take some people to make that step. Probably as church ministers like myself, if I wear my cassock and we are 50 of us and we march to State House leading a front, leading a group, or we march to Parliament, probably it may redefine engagements there. But let me leave that there. I may not exclusively define or propose a formula, but I guess we must grab what the Constitution says is ours without letting the government get away with it. My position. Thank you.
So I also say that the basic foundation of any of leadership is to serve the people around you and the people who put you to power. And this is where the church actually comes in, as you as you are aware, my activism is mostly on churches, because I believe that the church holds the key to what the country is going through. That is why most of the time I go to churches and try to just to activate the church and let the church know that their voices need to be heard. And I'm happy that we've seen fruits of that. Churches now coming up and condemning and speaking truth to power. There isn't few, if I would say, last few weeks, we've seen different churches coming up and actually condemning what has been happening. Some condemn because probably the deputy president is from their ethnical background, but majority of them actually condemn based on what they see that the government is not doing something which is not right. And I believe that the church is crucial in shaping the foundation of good leaders. I was brought up, I'm an Anglican, and I remember when we were actually being taken to, it was mandatory for us to go to church. And this is where leadership skills actually are born. We would all agree on that for people who actually raised in Christian families, that we go to church and you are taught how to behave around people, how to talk to elders. And that was basically the foundation of how leaders should behave or how a person should behave. And there's a general consensus that we all agree that the Kenyan government or the current leaders that we have are corrupt. Most of them are not, majority of them have no ethical leadership skills, no transparency when it comes to governance. Public trust is actually not even there. That actually comes from the president. The public trust is not there. Sometimes when the president or the government tries to push for an idea which is actually good, but majority of us don't support it because the public trust is gone. And this is to basically to blame it on the leaders, because this is what they've been feeding us. They've been feeding us lies and all this. And the current government or the current leaders that we have a lack of consultative leadership. Yet the Bible tells us that plans fail for lack of counsel. That is in Proverbs 15. You see, I was brought up when to believe in a church. You remember when the church of Ndingi Mwana Nzeki, Anthony Muheri, Alexander Kipsang Muge, Archbishop David Gitari, and now we have Evans Omolo, who actually speak truth to power. And that is something that we should encourage, and the church should speak in one voice just to tell the current regime that sometimes they have to lead based on what the citizens want. And I'm sorry to say that if the church is quiet, we are feeding a monster that later would come and eat all of us when the monster is full. Because what I also think is the current leaders or the current government is trying to test limits of what we can take as a country. And as soon as they know that there's not, they can get away with anything that they do, then it would be a problem to all of us. So basically, I ask the church to speak for the voiceless. Just as the church used to, just as the church that we used to know, the church that would speak for the voiceless, the church that would stand up and condemn what is not right and what is not wrong. Now that we don't have an opposition, now that the government is also to some extent is in bed with some churches. Let me use some churches because not all the churches are in bed with the government. So part of the church, or part of people who believe that, part of the people who believe that church has the key to what we are going through as a country. And just to submit, I ask everybody who's here or provost to help push for the narrative or the narrative of the 20-minute allocation, which I'm trying to push also in churches, 20-minute allocation of civic education. And this comes from, we've seen politicians going to churches and corrupt mind of vulnerable citizens. And this is majorly done in slums and in the villages. You'll never see politicians with their caravans in Runda, Muthaiga, Kitusuru, and all that. They purposely do this in Kitusuru. They purposely do this in the slums. So I ask, with the help of church leaders who are here, to help us push the narrative of allocation of 20 minutes civic education during their services, just to tell the congregants on the importance of voting good leaders, so that we don't have a problem after voting for someone less than a year or less than 2 years, then we start crying because of their policies that are actually affecting us. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colin. That was a good one. And I hope, Provost, that is possible over time. Or maybe something to be considered, because I think it makes sense that these politicians are propagating their propaganda, sometimes in church, lying to people in terms of what they're doing and the things they say with a big platform. I think it's also good to have people who can counter that which they say. But I also feel, would it be the easiest way to do it, because then you have a pro and counter situation? I don't know, but something that you can speak to over time.
My sincere apologies for this, but allow me just to make some little rejoinder to what has been said, part of which is to clarify a few other things that came in a little earlier. So, on what has been the conversation zeroing in on the role of the church and the church and the church and all that, I forgot to mention to Western earlier that the church has failed miserably in many respects, but in many instances, the church has, again, sections of the church has stepped forth and done really, really well. Just to give an example, sometimes we don't make noise about these things, and so they're not heard, and therefore everybody will dismiss the church to be really irrelevant and doing nothing in terms of social responsibility. For example, the church where I serve, my colleague is here, Reverend Ignatius, and of course, Dr. Buyema, who gave his submissions earlier, is our member and my very good friend, and several others. Also, by the way, let me tell you, when the Gen Z thing was happening, do you know we are among the very few churches in the city who raised money, put together resources, visited people in hospitals, paid certain bills in Kenyatta and elsewhere, and even supported those whose families were killed. We did a fundraiser on Sabasaba, 7/7, July 7th, under the auspices of National Council of Churches of Kenya. And we released those. Probably, I must admit, maybe our failure is capturing these things from an informational perspective and publicizing them. But sometimes when that is missed, the populace know that we are doing nothing. Reverend Malimo, who is here, my colleague, Reverend Joroge, several others, we went to several bedsides in Kenyatta, prayed with several people, and offered counseling. You remember, there is that lady who lost her son in Rongai, facilitated her, came, we supported her, including counseling and all that. So really, not that the church has been dead quiet, we do our stuff. Secondly, also to clarify, if there is one church you'd want to find in the city, and this I'll say standing even on top of KICC, that will never ever give a politician pulpit to speak, is All Saints Cathedral, where Serena is on the other side. No politician speaks from All Saints Cathedral. The only person who speaks is the president, only as a symbol of national unity, and no one else, whether it's a funeral, whether it's a what. So we retain that with a lot of pride and dignity, and they know, whoever you are, whether you're a governor, you will, if you come for a funeral, you'll speak on matters to condole with the family, but not politics and abusing other people. I will sign off by saying a number of things. One, I want to encourage all of us. When we say the church, I know we mean the leadership of the church, but remember the church is us as well. Please hold your church leaders accountable in the spaces where you are at. If you belong to a church where your pastor gives this mrengo politicians a chance to abuse the other mrengo, and then they clap, or they pray for them, or they give these ones front seat, or they deny the other one front seat, please be bold enough And as Collins has said, correct some of those things with your pastors. Some of us pastors can be blinded, especially where they give and receive envelopes. Please tell your pastors, we don't like this. We want standards in our church. And that's how All Saints has been able to set traditions and define parameters. For us, even Raila has come several times. There's a time Wajaluo ganged up against me, say, oh, this is a fellow Jaluo pastor, and Raila has come here. It's an opportunity for him to give Raila to speak. And I refused. They said he's betraying us. Ona hii mutu amenunuliwa na Wakikuyu. But I stood my ground. So, colleagues, I'm saying we must have a spine and stand on what is right and speak about those things without necessarily feeling that it's the pastor's responsibility. It is us who make the church. Secondly, in terms of morals, I think one of the submissions was around morals that is expected of us. We failed terribly. Again, we must introspect across the board as electorate, and the electorate consists of the church. What type of leaders do we want? And I think that is Collins' passion, that we do good civic education, equip the people to know what type of leaders to elect. Really, for me, I think, what is our value base? What is our morality? What type of leaders do we want? And as I said earlier, how can we hold them accountable? Do we know that the Constitution gives us a right to recall? I tried to threaten my Member of Parliament, Honorable Tienda Molo, that we'll activate the recall clause, because he's doing terribly nothing as far as representing the people of Rarieda is concerned. And the other day he came and fixed two things that made me to threaten him. That was just one person, me. So imagine if several of us came together and put pressure even on those people in terms of what they're meant to deliver for us. I'd want to encourage us, number two, to really take up that role. And I think I will stop there. I'd made other practical suggestions earlier. Eli will pick them up. But I pray that the conversation continues. Obets, the real Joe, several of us are here, Western. Many of us are here. Let's contribute. But I'd wish, from where I sit, let's follow each other on the social media platform. For me, what I need most, and Collins knows this, is information. If you have information that would help us push advocacy, we'd really love to partner, so that the platform God has given us, which I have, some of you may not have, we can use them to speak truth to those in positions of leadership. Mizani, asanteni sana. Mungu awabariki mnapoendelea na majadiliano. Shukrani sana.
Thank you so much, Reverend, and thank you for honoring us with your time. Glad that you followed. I see you already followed us, but we encourage that we get to follow the provost as well, so that, as he says, he needs information. But also, what you speak to the fact that we need to never stop, continue doing this, and it's all hands on deck. And I think we've also said it here on Mizani 254 that we all have different abilities and capacities and technical support and things that we can do differently. We're differently abled in a way that the gift that you have, if we can all pull together, then we're going to be a very strong force. Let nobody tell you that what you're doing here is not good enough. It is good enough to amplify what's going on. These spaces are recorded. When people have time to go back and listen to them, history will remember that you took your time to do that which you're doing here. And so thank you so much, Provost. We wish you a good night. We reach out to you again, and I hope that it's not so hard. We can always work on ensuring that we'll do a report for this conversation. Definitely, we'll share that with you for purposes of record, so that in the future there's always a reference to this. Thank you very much, and that's it.
Thank you, Mizani, Obed, the real Joe, and everybody who's on this space. I was coming here to talk about foundations of leadership, and I found a leader from the church, and I was like, oh no, not again. Kwa sababu jana tulikuwa na nyinyi kanisani in the morning. But since we're looking at
It was necessary, Redemptor.
yes, I know.
Had been scheduled, but thank you for that.
I was so triggered. I mean, I ended up doing a space to talk about the spiritual mothers of this nation, because a lot of them are also church leaders. And it feels like we have a vacuum of mothers, whether spiritual or national mothers. My take on this, because you brought the provost and the men of God and women of God, there's a scripture that is quoted that really triggers me, and that is that all authority is from God. For someone who's seen so much evil, because I watch a lot of crime, I always wonder what that statement comes from. All authority is from God. And that is one scripture that has been used in this country, misused when the church is being an apologist. And so extraordinary times calls for extraordinary measures. And I would not want to talk about the church because I don't go to church. If I had one, ningekuwa nimesumbua pastor yangu mpaka akanifukuza. But I do speak to pastors. I think we need to talk about the leaders, not the church, because when it becomes semantics, what is the church? You're also the church. Take responsibility. So I want to focus on the leadership conversation. I've heard Collins being very nice and thanking the provost for hiding the youth. That is what is expected of them. It's like thanking a mother for taking care of their child. You know, we are not thanked enough as mothers, but it should come so naturally that you don't expect, oh, thank you for saving so many people. Maybe they would have saved more if they spoke up. Maybe immediately the first service after 25th should have been thou shalt not kill in all the churches. So, I mean, Mugema akisifiwa tembo ulitia maji. I do not believe in being thanked for serving if I'm a servant leader. But if it encourages, mwanadamu aliumbwa wa kutiwa moyo, so it's good to encourage them. I think the problem we have right now with leadership in church is the two extremes. The church has become so powerful and everybody who is under somebody fears the authority of that. I'm talking about the two extremes we have. We have the autonomous churches, hizi ni kama ziliitwa kiosk. So they are family enterprises, the man of God called Papa, the woman of God called Mama, you know. And then we have these other mainstream churches where the hierarchy is so strong that you cannot bring a provost here and start throwing stones at him, because until his boss has spoken, he'll just come and sometimes well-meaning give the political correct position. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, he's employed. He's on a payroll. There's the HR involved. And then the other extreme of the churches that have really put us in a mess. These two institutions have put us in a mess because of that leadership. That you're a leader, and when you started, the foundation of your leadership was a calling to serve, and you listen to the voice of God. The same thing with leaders in the political. They were called by the constituents to serve, and they answer to the constitution, but then they end up answering to a political party. So it's in a way that these two groups are held hostage by the paycheck. And that's the problem we have right now in this nation. A few years ago, when you talk about Ndingi Mwana Anzeki, he couldn't be fired. But right now, I think there are so many people waiting for these jobs that what I would like to see is I would like to see a clergy walk away from a church job, a leap of faith and say, let me be fired. I don't care what the bishop said. It's me who was called by God, and I'm seeing the evil in my society. So the foundational issue is you are called as an individual. So when do you become like, okay, let me give an example. When the Catholic Church is going to see the president after young people have been killed, and they read a statement, that is the hardest thing I ever watched. Because they write a statement of 2 pages, and they are the council of bishops, I don't know what they call them, the group of them. They come to read the statement, and to be politically correct, 3 sentences are read by the bishop from Ngong. 5 sentences are read by the bishop from Nyeri. 4th, what is that? Because they want to be part of that statement. They don't even trust each other that you read the statement for us. And then that's where we should see the authority, the hero worship for this other group of enterprise. And then for this one, I've had commendations for Bishop Muhera. Bishop Muhera has a security of tenure, so he should actually talk more. Can you imagine a young reverend father from his, what is it called? Not parish, it's called diocese. If he started running amok like that and started coercing the government, he'll be transferred to Garissa or to Lamu. So I think what we need to see is we need to see people walking away from authority when the authority is not serving what they were called to serve. A good example, we have a policeman who went for maandamano. He ended up resigning after he was thrown out. And some of these things we ask ourselves, are they popularist move or are they conviction? And in the case of church leaders, is it a leap of faith, a free fall moment? Let me be fired. If it's God who called me, he'll provide for me. We've seen recently, Jeremiah Kioni walked away from an interview. Was it a popularist move? Was it conviction that I'm not going to sit with someone who said young people should be killed? We saw Mother Karua walk out on Moi, one of the best moments of my life to see a woman stand up to the all-powerful Moi from Kirinyaga in a stadium. We've seen that the policeman walk away. So for me, I think the call to every leader, whether you're in a party, you're Sifuna and people like you, you're popular, but you umeshikwa mahali by the party. I want to see people walking away and not saying it's never been done. And I think it leads to, what was your motive for becoming a leader? Was it to get paid, or did you come to serve and get paid as you get? I think the greatest message for all leaders across the board, whether you're in the church, is just to go back to the foundations and say, thou shalt not kill is in every religious book, is in our constitution. So shouldn't that be the message we are hearing more than what they bring, all extension of what? 5 year term to 7, they all run and make a statement. When they are threatened with a bill to control the church, they run and make a statement. But when it comes to killing, the statements are very politically correct. So, Collins, if you're still here, I know you're asking for civic education, but I think you should be more bold and print a banner with all the people who died, the names, and say, can I roll this banner on the same day that I'm asking for my 15 minutes? So that when you're standing there for that civic education, you remind them of a moral, the teachings of that church is that thou shalt not kill, and guilt them a bit. People are very, very uncomfortable about being reminded of their sins. So I think the civic education is politically correct without reminding them that people died. So, I mean, as you're looking for people to support you, print a rollout banner with the names of the 60 people who died. And so if they will not allow you to put that banner there as you speak, then you have no business being there, because that is our moral campus, church. And that's where we should start. We should start by telling them people died and all you do is go to make statements about the youth, these jobs, these what. No, the statement should first come with that statement, thou shalt not kill. As for churches who allow these people to take money, it's like the provost has said, it's the people who are in those churches that we need to go for. They are the ones to blame. Because do you remember when the height of Mandamano, they went to a church and they had those security things put, and those people like Kondo, honestly, they look like sheep. Wakipita pale through the scanners, you're going to the house of God through a scanner because the president is there with GSU. So how do you blame now then those leaders in that church? You blame those condos. And I guess the condo is used a lot there. It's a worst thing that could have been put in that book, calling people condo. I wish they just called us a goat, because a goat is more, has a mind of its own. So I mean, the provost is gone. Maybe you listen to my message. I will look for him and see how we can partner in this messaging, because we really have. It's not the usual. It's not the usual wait for the Olesipita. And the media also. What is the role of the media? Someone has said we just need to listen to news to know what the president was. The worst part is that the media looks for the clergy to rebuttal. What did he say? Then you run. So what we do, we work harder and make TikToks of those messages, analyze them, and make our own messages, because these are extraordinary times, and we have to use extraordinary means to bring this country to order. We are in a very bad place as a country, and that's why we are not sleeping. Ordinarily, we would be doing other things with our time, but we are here continually because in our gut feeling, we know that things are wrong. So thank you for it's not midnight, but for working this late, for consistently doing this. I don't think you do it because it's fun. You do it because it's a duty. It is necessary. So asanteni sana, hosts, co-hosts, and all the listeners. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Reds. I didn't see that coming, but you're firing and you're on fire. I love what you've submitted, to be very honest. There's no better way to capture the essence of this conversation. I like what you've done in terms of trying to draw a parallel between what politics and the church is and how it's good to make these people uncomfortable with the truth, however painful it is. Thank you so much for that submission. Eli, I think we need to have something that specifically captures that conversation and probably spread it properly. Real Joe, to you.
Thank you very much, Obed. One thing that is coming out clearly is that we don't really have. You see, I've heard the clarion call of the of Reverend Omolo, and he's actually been very clear in saying we need to be united in in standing up firm against some of the atrocities of this regime. But I want to draw a statement from 2017. There's this lawyer called Charles Kanjama. He outrightly called the church in 2017 and called them that and said that they were divided into half in the build-up to 2007 elections, and they failed to do anything in the ethnic flare-up. And he even went ahead and said that, this division of the church made the church weak in a manner that they could not even question, or they could not lead the country towards any direction. And in fact said that the church had lost legitimacy then. And he asked people, he asked the general public not to trust the church. Looking at that scenario now, I see the church divided again. Why am I saying this? I see the church divided in a manner that there are those who are unable to still question and still stand up for the people. Because the church should be number one in championing for social justice. These things are there in the Bible. Equity. Do not kill, just like Redemptor said. Every other thing about social justice is there in any religion, not even just the church, any religion. So the church has then, we can point fingers, and we are not just pointing fingers without having any substance or basis to which we point our fingers. But still, on the context of the church, I read the story of Moses. He was leading the Israelites to the promised land, the famous Exodus story. When they got, it's a long story, but just a few things about the story. When they got to the Red Sea, they were supposed to cross it. When they got there, they started crying, how are we going to cross this? The other guys are on our back, they're coming. Why did you remove us from that place? You'd have just let us die there rather than just come this far and die here. Moses had to go back to God and ask God, I'm here with these people. What can I do? God told Moses, the tool that you have is your stick. Use that to hit the ocean, the Red Sea, and it will open up. And Moses did that. And he was able to lead the Israelites past to the other side. The moral of the story for me is, number one, Moses had to prove to the people that he could actually do something. Number one, he had to prove that he could do something. Number two, Moses, is as much as he had to prove, he had to go back to God and ask God, you know what? We are here. We cannot go back. What can we do? Show me what to do. And he was actually shown what to do. Same scenario. I think the main picture that politicians try to paint in our country is they go to church to seek guidance, but they never actually seek guidance. They go to church to talk at people. They use these platforms that are purportedly sanctuaries to spread misinformation. And at some point, we have outrightly questioned the church for giving platforms. We cannot actually, as the Reverend said, someone like the president is a symbol of national unity. And therefore, sometimes you will never deny the head of state that platform. That is true. But the other politicians can be denied these platforms. Can it be now a clarion call to all churches to deplatform these politicians? When I say deplatform, it sounds like anyway. But can it be a clarion call that churches should not give platform? I know, Obed, you're putting your hand up, but let me say this. The fundamental, pulpit power. Churches are supposed to be sacred. And they have lost this because of I mean, yes, the church is where sinners go to seek the guidance of God. At the same time, it is not a place that we are supposed to go to play and make statements that are beneficial to individual or self. I see leadership as public trust, just as our constitution says it in Article 73. That is leadership. And this public trust should be respected because it is a responsibility. And therefore, anybody who takes up leadership should understand the aspirations of Kenyans. The leader should understand that as you are a leader, given this responsibility, you also have a responsibility to perform. It is not just to lead and to perform. If you found the economy struggling, you are supposed to perform and bring up the economy. While you are leading, you should know that you are leading the people. And therefore, borrowing from the concept of responsibility matrix, you're supposed to always consult and inform the people. That is where you're supposed to seek your consultation. And the Constitution even says that in Article 232, that, leadership is all about consulting and ensuring that the people participate. It is their leadership. Otherwise, they have given you the responsibility to lead them. But it is a collective role that the people are supposed to define what leadership means to them. Having said all that, I don't see a leadership, I don't see anybody, or I don't think I need to call anybody a leader who has no vision. We need to see vision in leadership. Those are things that we are questioning. And therefore, as I learned before I bring in the next speaker, I think that we have played into the books of the current people we are calling leaders. And how do we change that? How do we change that? We need to stand up as a people. We can only stand up. We cannot do any other thing. That is all we have. That is all we have. We only have to do that. And when I hear everybody speak very eloquently about what leadership means, and we don't really have that, then it is a problem. And is it the problem of the leaders, or now it is the problem of those who are being led? Because this is what has been happening for several years, for a very long time. That means it is the problem of those who are being led. What can those people who are being led do about what is happening?